taken permission.
Federal government does not have the person power
than anybody in the world to promote the venerable Jeffersonian idea of nullification.
The Supreme Court may have their opinion on Obamacare.
Nullify these people into oblivion.
Good morning, Liberty. It is Monday morning, April 22nd, 2019. My name is Michael Bolden, broadcasting to you live from here in my home office and studio in downtown Los Angeles for the 10th Amendment Center. I hope you had a wonderful Easter weekend. I had some time off. I worked a bit on Saturday, but spent some time with my lovely partner, Sarah, this weekend. We got to see the ocean a little bit, go to Chinatown. It was nice just to eat some food and relax. So I hope you had a wonderful weekend. Whatever you did, celebrating, relaxing, spending time with friends, family, anything. And of course, thank you for spending some time with me today. For those of you who are watching live, whether it's on any of our channels through Facebook, Periscope, Twitter, DLive, or here on YouTube, you'll notice I did a couple of little changes here in the office. I was running out of workspace on my desk, so I switched a few things around. So hopefully the shot is working and all the gear that I reconnected is working properly. If not, please do let me know in the live chat. Now, today's show, rather than talking about just one specific issue like I normally do on this show, I pick a topic. Sometimes I tie in some recent developments in the nullification movement to that particular topic, or like on Friday's show, I talked about Rachel Maddow and all of the left and right-wing pundits and politicians who are using her talking points to go against nullification, depending on who's in charge in Washington, D.C. Today's show, I want to do something a little bit different. And for a while, I was doing kind of a test run of a news update show in the evenings, just once in a while, through our Facebook and Periscope accounts called the TAC Digest, where I would do about 10 minutes of updates on news from the nullification movement. But instead of continuing with that, at least for the time being, and I may pick that up again in the near future, instead of just continuing with that, I've decided to expand the Good Morning Liberty broadcast to stream to multiple platforms instead of just YouTube, and every now and then do that type of an episode here on Good Morning Liberty. So today, what I'm going to do is the first of those where I'm basically doing an update on news in the nullification movement. I'm not going to go into any heavy detail on any particular news report that I'm covering, but I'm going to cover various things, bills that have been introduced, considered, or are moving forward to undermine or reject some piece of federal power. We're going to talk about federal gun control. We're going to talk about state gun control and decriminalizing through constitutional carry. We're going to talk about marijuana prohibition, CBD, and the FDA. Health freedom, despite the fact that Obamacare is still on the books and doesn't seem to be going anywhere, even though maybe a piece or two is gone. A lot of the worst regulations are still on the books, so we'll talk about state-level efforts on that. License plate tracking and surveillance, and if I've got time, I guess I'm just going to kind of ramble through this and see how it works, and if you guys like it. And if so, I want to also talk a little bit about asset forfeiture. But if you guys like this type of program every now and then, I will continue to include them. Of course, you can leave me some feedback on that, either in the live chat or in the archive on the comments. Or, of course, you can email me over at team@10thamendmentcenter.com. So let's take a look in the live chat before going to our reports here. Hello to Harlan Bounds, Justin, Robert, Tyler, Service over on YouTube. And then, of course, Dan Reed, Chris Branco, Michael, Dennis on Facebook, plus a few others. I appreciate you spending some time with me today. I think it's really awesome that you are doing so. Now, if you want to keep up to date, now, because for those of you who follow us on social media, we don't post very many. I mean, we do post a lot in comparison to some other pages and profiles, but in comparison to the amount of articles that we've published and news reports and updates that we publish and videos, we're only taking a small choice fraction. If you really want to keep up to date with everything, the best place to do that is through an RSS feed. I should have a link to that but generally over in the show notes and the archives over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/Good Morning Liberty, you can find the links to all of our social platforms plus our RSS feed. That way you can keep up in your own feed reader at your own leisure on all the posts that we do here. Or you can get our newsletter where we give a more condensed version, but more often and more detailed than what you'd see on social media. And that's 10thamendmentcenter.com/register. So let's take a look over at some of the articles that I want to cover today. First one starts in Missouri. This one got a lot of reach in a social post that we did last week. Missouri committee passes bill to take on federal gun control, past, present, and future. I did an article talking about some right-wing opposition to any efforts to nullify federal gun control a few weeks back. I don't have a link to that right offhand. I just thought of it now, so I apologize for that. But that one covers in detail what we see as the opposition from the right. Now, you'd think anyone who's trying to undermine federal gun control would get support from across the gun rights groups, but we very rarely see that outside of Gun Owners of America. In fact, the National Rifle Association, NRA, has oftentimes aggressively opposed us behind the scenes, especially in Missouri. Back in 2013, we saw a similar bill spearheaded by Missouri First, Ron Calzone and the Grassroots, plus Senator Brian Nieves, who used to be around, and Representative Funderburk. They really worked hard to get this bill moving and passed while Barack Obama was in office, but we were certainly undermined by law enforcement lobby groups, gun control groups, and, of course, the NRA was working against it as well. But we see a new, refreshed push for this in Missouri, which is very positive. Senate Bill 367 was filed by Senator Eric Burleson, titled the Second Amendment Preservation Act. This is from a report by Mike Meharry last week on the 18th, so I guess that was Thursday. The legislation would ban any person, including any public officer or employee of the state and its political subdivisions, from enforcing any past, present, or future acts, laws, executive orders, administrative orders, court orders, rules, or regulations that infringe on the right to keep and bear arms. So this actually passed out of its first committee last week, Thursday. It was I don't know what committee it is. Some weird transportation committee in the state Senate. I think it was put there to kind of hold it up or try to kill it, but luckily there was a lot of pressure on this in the grassroots, and Senate Bill 367 was passed out of committee just last week, Thursday. Now it's going to be up to the leadership of the state Senate to schedule it for a vote on the floor of the Senate. There's a similar bill in the state House, House Bill 1039, that for some reason, and this was filed back in February, it has like more than 24 co-sponsors. And for some reason, the Speaker of the House hasn't even assigned House Bill 1039 to a committee for a hearing. I think what they're doing is they're waiting to see what happens on the Senate side. So if the Senate bill passes, they're going to quick push forward on the House bill to match it up so you have two separate bills. I don't know if that's a tactic to try to slow down the process and kill it. It could be. They've done things like that in the past, but we'll be keeping an eye on that going forward. Senate Bill 367 rejects all federal gun control and sets the stage for people to be able to focus inward on the gun control in Missouri as well. I know a lot of people who are right to keep and bear arms supporters would probably acknowledge that there are a lot of things on the books in Missouri that needs to be removed. So take one layer away, peel it like an onion, and then once this gets passed, move forward and continually address the state level restrictions on the right to keep and bear arms as well. So Senate Bill 367 is moving forward, just passed out of committee last week in Missouri. Here's an interesting overview of the bill from the Missouri General Assembly as well. It declares invalid all federal laws that infringe on the right to keep and bear arms under the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution and Article 1, Section 23 of the Missouri Constitution. I do like that they actually reference their own state constitutions. Not enough people do this. The act declares that it is the duty of the courts and law enforcement agencies to protect the rights of law-abiding citizens to keep and bear arms. And under this act, no public officer of the state or local employee has the authority to enforce firearms laws declared invalid by the act. If this would pass, this sets the stage or the foundation to becoming a gun rights sanctuary state in Missouri. There's a similar bill up for consideration in Texas, House Bill 238. That was given a hearing back in February. It was from Representative Matt Krause in Fort Worth, but it has not been given an executive session vote in the state house in the committee there in Texas. But a similar or different bill, House Bill 2268, was voted out of committee just in the last week or so. And this takes a similar approach to the kind of whole sanctuary city or sanctuary state where they're not going to enforce a federal gun control measure, but for firearm suppressors. We know now that Arkansas, Tennessee, and maybe others, at least the ones that I've covered, I've only started looking into this more closely recently. Arkansas this year, Tennessee back in 2017 have fully decriminalized sound suppressors, more commonly referred to as silencers, which are illegal to have unless you're following all kinds of government regulations on the federal level under the NFA, which shouldn't exist in the first place. I saw somebody else, Michael Bogus, says NRA equals negotiating our rights away. Repeal the NFA, he says. Absolutely. And Michael also says too many people are complacent, including gun owners. But yeah, the NFA is totally unconstitutional and shouldn't exist. So when states are basically following the NFA and also criminalizing the same things that the feds do, it makes it doubly bad. So a very positive, although not a huge effect in practice right off the bat, a very positive step forward is to remove that federally prohibited item from the controlled substances list on the state level. And I say controlled substances, of course, as kind of a tip of the hat towards the marijuana activists who've done very much the same for a long time. And we're starting to see similar efforts on the right to keep and bear arms. So you can decriminalize sound suppressors. They've done so in Arkansas and Tennessee. This bill would actually ban the state from helping the federal government enforce any federal law on sound suppressors as long as they weren't law in the state. Now, I don't know, and Mike Meharry's been doing some research on this for our report, which we're going to have out pretty soon. Does Texas currently have on the books a prohibition on sound suppressors? It's kind of convoluted. It almost seems like they're legal as long as you're following federal law in Texas. Well, so the first step would be to pass House Bill 2286, which did pass out of committee. It's going to the Calendars Committee, which it's going to get voted on by the full House soon, or hopefully it will. Then once they pass this, then they should decriminalize those suppressors on a state level and move forward from there. So the next bill that I want to cover is in Alabama. My buddy EHP Training has been keeping me up to date on this. It has been getting moved around in committees. This is a constitutional carry bill. I'm not going to go over all the details. It's basically permitless carry in a large area for Alabama. Senate Bill 4 was first assigned to the Senate Judiciary Committee and just kind of sat there. Then it was scheduled for a hearing. Then it was delayed. And it seems like it was moved to another committee, the Committee on Tourism of all things, for a vote potentially tomorrow. Now, I was told that it was going to be up for a vote tomorrow, the 23rd. That's Wednesday morning. And I'm seeing here on Legiscan, which I follow, the latest update from the Alabama Senate Committee says the bill removed. Now, I don't know if that means that they've removed it from consideration or if it was removed from the previous hearing in the other committee and is going to get a vote tomorrow. We'll be keeping an eye on that as well. This is an important bill in Alabama for constitutional carry that should be up for a hearing and vote in committee very soon, hopefully tomorrow on the 23rd. I did reference another episode that I had done previously, but if you want some more details on my views about decriminalizing in regards to the right to keep and bear arms, I did an episode earlier this month, Decriminalize an Important Strategy for Gun Rights. That was on April 8th, 2019. I have the link to it in the show notes on YouTube. And of course, over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/goodmorningliberty. Now, for those of you who were celebrating 420 over the weekend, we've got a number of reports that cover cannabis, marijuana, and federal prohibition. For example, in New Hampshire earlier this month, House Bill 481 passed out of the state house by a vote of, it looks like 200 to 163. House Bill 481 would legalize cannabis for people 21 years of age or older and tax it like alcohol. I'm not a fan of taxing things, but this is a step forward. Marijuana is currently legal in every state that borders New Hampshire. Maine and Massachusetts legalized it by ballot referendum in 2016, and Vermont state legislature legalized in 2018. So New Hampshire, of all places, is the last holdout on this. But it passed 200 to 163 earlier in the month. It's up for a hearing and potential vote in its first Senate committee, so now it has to pass through the state Senate before it gets to the governor, who said he's opposed to it. They are close to having a veto-proof majority on this where they can override a veto. We'll see what happens. It's up for a hearing in committee on the Senate side tomorrow on the 23rd. That's House Bill 481. An interesting bill over in Colorado. Now, some people say, okay, they do this tax and regulate thing, and then what do you do from there? You still have problems on the state level. And the same thing can be applied on the right to keep and bear arms. So let's say you decriminalize or you ban the state from helping the feds enforce the NFA on suppressors. Well, then, of course, you have to turn your direction, because our goal is liberty. And even though we don't get 100% liberty in one step, or almost never happens, you have to keep following up. So if Texas were to pass House Bill 2286, I believe the bill number was, 2286, then of course, then they have to turn inward, where you have a better chance of advocating and advancing things for liberty in the state, on the state level, rather than on the federal level. But the same thing happens on weed, too. And I think smart people will pay attention to what they're doing on weed, learn how the last 20 plus years has been incredibly successful, where there are now 33 states flat out defying Washington, D.C. on this, and we hear now the feds are looking to back off. You can implement this in other areas of our lives. So last week, Thursday, the Colorado House passed a bill that would authorize cannabis hospitality establishments for public consumption of marijuana. So basically weed cafes. This is totally illegal under federal law. It is currently illegal under state law, too, in Colorado. But House Bill 1230 passed the state house by a vote of 41 to 24. So we'll be keeping an eye on that as well and see where it leads. And the last thing that I want to cover on the prohibition era is CBD. I did an entire episode at the beginning of April talking about CBD legalization versus FDA prohibition. The FDA has flat out told us that including CBD products in anything that's edible is 100% illegal. Well, West Virginia, just a few days after that episode, they followed up by passing a bill, House Bill 2694. It passed the House by a vote of 96-2 and the Senate by a vote of 33-1. It was signed by the governor just a few days after I did that episode and will go into effect in June. Now, it's mostly about hemp farming in West Virginia, which has been growing, pun intended, over the last few years. But under this law, they specifically address CBD as well. According to Mike Meharry's reporting on this, he says, under the new law, derivatives of hemp, including hemp-derived cannabidiol, which is CBD, can be added to cosmetics, personal care products, and products intended for animal or human consumption. And the addition is not considered an adulteration of the product. So here's West Virginia flat out saying, we're going to allow you to do this. It's up to the market now. If the people in the marketplace want to take the risk of federal prosecution and go forward anyways, we'll see how that plays out. It ultimately is up to human action, individual and group activity, the markets deciding what they're going to do. But West Virginia getting this layer of prohibition out of the way is very helpful, because we know the FDA doesn't have enough armed thugs to be able to pull off their prohibition on this without help from state or local law enforcement. So again, the link to that report and the previous episode on CBD are both in the show notes. 10thamendmentcenter.com/goodmorningliberty. The next report I think is really interesting to me, and I know Mike Meharry and I have talked about this in previous episodes of our 10th or Tuesday, which we would do covering reports here. Mike's actually going to be starting a new show for us here at the 10th Amendment Center, 10th Talk. He's going to interview various authors, activists, etc. Maybe once a month. I don't know. We'll just kind of play it out and see how it works. He's going to start doing some more long form, mid form. For those of you who watch Rogan, long form is like 3 to 5 hours. He'll probably do anywhere from 20 to 40-minute interviews with people talking about specific issues and their expertise. Maybe once a month. We'll start on that pretty soon. But he's talked about this because he has what's called a direct primary care plan for his health care in Kentucky. And the only way I can describe this is like the old school Netflix, where they would deliver you DVDs for a flat monthly fee. It's Netflix for healthcare. You sign up for a plan. I think he pays like $100 a month. I don't know. They just started coming to the Los Angeles area, and I've noticed there's one in Glendale, which is a few miles here from downtown Los Angeles. The plans are $150 to $200 a month, and they cover basically all your day-to-day stuff. It doesn't cover x-rays or emergency care and things like that, but your day-to-day coverage, your needs at the doctor. You get direct communication with the doctor. I think he was even texting back and forth, like unheard of, rather than waiting in a waiting room for hours and hours and hours. Here in LA, if you want to get a new doctor, you're going to wait. I mean, to try to set up an appointment, you're going to wait weeks, if not a month or two, to try to do that. So there's a lot of problems with the healthcare system. Most of it are caused by government regulation, government insurance regulation, government roadblocks to the marketplace. So this direct primary care model, basically what's happening is the healthcare on a month-to-month contract basis. It's not even a contract. It's on a month-to-month basis. As long as you're paying this concierge service, it's outside the control of state regulation of insurance codes. So maybe I'm not explaining this well, but let me read a little bit from Harry's report on Arizona that we published this morning. Last Wednesday, Arizona Governor Doug Ducey signed a bill into law that would help facilitate healthcare freedom outside of government insurance regulatory schemes. He goes on. Senator Heather Carter, who's a Republican from Cave Creek, she sponsored Senate Bill 1105. The new law specifies that direct primary care agreements, sometimes called medical retainer agreements, do not constitute insurance, thereby freeing doctors, dentists, and patients from the onerous requirements and regulations under the state insurance code. So basically, if you sign up for one of these plans with your doctor, the state no longer sees it as insurance, and therefore you don't have all the regulatory burden of the state insurance code. This removes some of the burden of the cost. We've heard Tom Wood's interview. I can't remember the doctor. I think it's the surgery center in Oklahoma where they don't accept insurance. They do all concierge-based service. They tell you the price in advance. The customer service is rated very highly. So basically you get a lower cost, higher quality when you get government out of the way. And this is an opportunity to have that happen in Arizona. We know it's happening here in California, in Kentucky, and a number of other states. So this passed the Senate by a vote of 30-0. The Senate division in Arizona is one of the most partisan places in the country. If a Republican introduces a bill that would normally be supported by Democrats, at least from my experience watching them, Democrats will vote against it, and vice versa. It's just most bills, when they get to the Senate floor, it's just party line votes, 16-14 or 17-13, whatever the makeup is right now. But so the fact that it passed 30-0 in the state Senate is very positive. The House passed it by a vote of 59-1. I'd like to know who this one clown in the entire legislature is that voted against this thing. Let me see if I can find the person. John Fillmore, a Republican, wanted to keep, it looks like John Fillmore, according to at least this, voted to keep direct primary care as insurance under state regulatory code. That's not good. Well, it was signed by Doug Ducey, and it's going to go into effect 90 days after the legislature adjourns, sometime in June or July. We'll be keeping you guys up to date on this. Here's what Michigan Capital Confidential wrote about these agreements, these direct primary care plans. Quote, under medical retainer agreements, patients make a monthly payment to a physician who in return agrees to provide a menu of routine services at no extra charge. Because no insurance company stands between patient and doctor, the hassles and expense of bureaucratic red tape are eliminated, which have resulted in dramatic cost reductions. Routine primary care services and the bureaucracy required to reimburse them are estimated to consume 40 cents out of every dollar spent on insurance policies. So lower premiums for a given amount of coverage are another potential benefit. So this is very positive. We're seeing moves forward on this in a bipartisan fashion. I'm very surprised by that, the way the votes are coming in. But it looks like 89-1 in the state legislature in Arizona, and it goes into effect this summer. So we'll be watching that as well and give you guys an update on any further developments in other states. On the surveillance front, in Massachusetts, a really not amazing bill, But if it's on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm going to say it's somewhere around a 6 or a 7, which in Massachusetts, I guess, is got to count for something. House Bill 3036 is a bill that would put strict limitations on the use of automated license plate reader systems. These are ALPRs. If you've seen a red light camera or a fast track kind of toll system, or a cop with a camera on. If you're watching the video here, you can see these little cameras with arrows pointed to it on the top of the cop car. They can be mobile. They can be affixed. They can read license plates at a mind-numbing speed. And what they've been doing, these are primarily funded by Department of Homeland Security. They're paid for through Homeland Security grants to local law enforcement. Then law enforcement, they install these things all over the place. This is why we should oppose, one of the many reasons we should oppose red light cameras, for example, fast track systems, and ALPRs in general. They put them in shopping malls. They put them in parking lots. And then they take this information and they feed it through something known as information sharing environment. This is a post-Patriot Act, post-9/11 Patriot Act type of information sharing program between federal, state, and local law enforcement, or through fusion centers. So what happens is a law enforcement agent in Boston, or at a toll booth, or at a red light camera, or in a parking lot, or outside a gun show in Boston or somewhere in Massachusetts, keeps track of where somebody is. They get the scan of the license plate, and then every law enforcement agency in the country knows where you are. And the type of profile that you can build on people based on where they go and who they associate with is incredibly powerful. That is one of the many reasons. I mean, we should oppose this just on its face, but the negative results can be pretty bad. So this legislation, House Bill 3036, is a positive step forward against that, the sharing of this information. We know the DEA, the Federal Unconstitutional Drug Enforcement Agency or Administration, whatever it is, shouldn't exist. They've been running a license plate tracking program for somewhere between 8 and 10 years. Totally illegal, never announced. They're tracking people all across the country, billions of scans over a 2-year period. It was like 2.5 billion scans over a 2-year period from just 300 law enforcement agencies. And they feed them all to the DEA, and they keep this license plate tracking program. They know where people are going and who they're associating with. And no matter what your political views are, you don't want government to be able to track and build profiles based on where you go and who you associate with, what stores you go to. Whether it's a weed store or a gun store or a church or a protest or a restaurant, doesn't matter. They should not be keeping this information without a warrant based on probable cause. So this legislation would restrict the use of license plate readers in Massachusetts, and then they would be banned from having a permanent database. A problem here in California, and there's a bill that they're trying to address that. Even though there are some very good movements on privacy efforts in California on facial recognition, stingray spying, and electronic data collection, license plate readers are a huge problem here in the LA, Southern California, and throughout the rest of the state. And one of the problems is they've had these cameras on the freeways for ages, and there's research that shows that law enforcement is keeping a permanent database. So they basically have this profile of everywhere you go. And then once you add facial recognition into it, the ACLU has reported, I think EFF as well, that they're also developing the ability and an improved ability to determine who your passengers are in the car as well. So they've got all this information, and it's not good. So you definitely don't want them sharing it. So this is going to prevent them from creating a permanent database of license plate readers or license plate scans in Massachusetts. And that's how Mike put it. Passage of this bill would prevent the state from creating permanent databases using information collected by ALPRs, and would make it highly unlikely that such data would end up in federal databases and disseminated through federal fusion centers. 2 more quick bill reports that I want to cover. One down in Texas again. They're starting to have a lot of hearings. There's a lot of legislation filed in Texas that we're monitoring, and it's good to see some of these bills at least move forward or at least get some consideration in public debate. House Bill 1347 from Representative Cecil Bell and Rick Miller. This is the Texas Sovereignty Act. This was up for a hearing last week, Wednesday. If you support it, and I'll tell you briefly what it is here in a moment. if you support it, you definitely want to call your state representative in Texas and ask them to co-sponsor the bill. The Texas Sovereignty Act would create a permanent joint legislative committee to review the constitutionality of federal laws, agency rules and regulations, executive orders, federal court decisions, and treaties. We know that states are not required to help the federal government violate your rights. We know. But the stuff, they don't stop magically. They've been doing this stuff, partnering with the feds, sharing money with asset forfeiture, sharing surveillance data. They get grant money, all kinds of garbage that shouldn't exist in the first place, and they keep helping their federal partners. Well, this bill in Texas is an interesting foundational piece because it creates the mechanism to review everything that the federal government does. And so it would have this permanent committee that would review federal acts. Now, of course, you have to realize they might put awful people on that committee. But then it's finding good people to be on a committee in Texas is going to be far easier than trying to find good people to fill the House of Representatives in Imperial Washington, D.C. So they would have this committee that would review legislation or anything done by the federal government. If they determine it's unconstitutional, that determination goes to the House of Representatives in the state. And if the state and Senate, and then it just goes through the regular legislative process to either approve or reject of that. And if that whole process goes through, then the state stops helping enforce those federal acts. So it's a process to do what we advise that all states should do all the time, and that is stop enforcing all unconstitutional federal acts, orders, rules, regulations, treaties, etc. So a vast majority of what they've passed in modern times. That was up for a hearing. And we're told from some insiders on the ground that it is very likely to be passed out of that committee in the next few days. So we'll be keeping an eye on House Bill 1347 in Texas. And the last bill is over in Hawaii. Hawaii has had the worst or some of the worst asset forfeiture laws on the books in the entire country, according to the Institute for Justice. They say they call Hawaii's asset forfeiture laws, quote, among the nation's worst. As it stands, police can take people's property without even charging them with a crime. Well, House Bill 748 has passed both chambers of the legislature in Hawaii, and this would require a criminal conviction before they can take anyone's property, before they can do any type of forfeiture. There are slightly different versions of it, and they're just kind of technical amendments, and a lot of times legislatures will do this as a way to slow down the process. But there are two different versions, and they have a conference committee meeting this week to decide what they're going to send as a final bill to the governor. It is a very positive step. It is not addressing the federal equitable sharing program, but we would take a change from one of the nation's worst, being able to take people's property without even charging them, to requiring a criminal conviction on a state level. The follow-up, should HB 748 get signed into law, would be to opt out of the federal asset forfeiture program known as equitable sharing. So looking over at the live chat, looks like there was a lot of interesting stuff going on over here. From Justin, George, Stephen over on Facebook. Joseph on Facebook says nullify all gun control. Derek Kennedy says, how do you turn this shit off? I guess you press pause or mute or close your browser window. It shouldn't be too tough, dude. Ernest says, I enjoy your content, need more coverage. Justin over on Facebook, all just revenue generation in the form of seizures and fines and arrests and prosecutions. They are investigating everyone in search of a crime. And there's a book out there, I can't think of the name of it, that basically says we're all committing like 3 different crimes every week or some crazy amount like that. Tom Rankin posted a link to gunrightswatch.com, the state of constitutional carry in the U.S. I will take a look at that. I appreciate that as well. Keeping up on all those. I know GOA is really, to me, is really the best organization on this. EHP's training says here and smashing, of course. If you like the content that I'm talking about here, if you find this educational, interesting, all that good stuff, make sure to smash the like button. Continue leaving some comments, whether it's here live or later on in the archives. And of course, all of our archives are over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/goodmorningliberty. You can find our main channels, Facebook, Twitter, Periscope, YouTube. Plus, we also share the archives over at BitChute, BitTube. We have DLive, where we stream live as well on a blockchain platform. And then, of course, we have the podcast version, iTunes, Google, Spotify, elsewhere, all the good stuff. You can find the links to all of that Oh, Nick Hankoff says, when's the next Nullify Now? Hi, Bolden. Sarah told me that we just got your card. Thank you so much for sending that our way. I don't know if we're organizing any events. I am actually speaking at the Republican Liberty Caucus National Convention, which is mid-May here in Southern California. RLC.org has a event listing for that. And then I'm also doing an interview with Jason Stapleton and Brian McWilliams this Thursday. We're all just kind of hanging out and doing that. So I'll post a link to that when I have an update on that as well. I do want to say hi to Justin, Paul, Woodsider, Joseph, and everybody else who's tuned in. I hope you find this enjoyable, educational, interesting, all that good stuff. And if you like this format of every now and then just going through kind of just a ton of bills without a lot of detail on them, let me know. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and if so, I will do more of these, maybe once a month or so. We'll see how things are going on a state or a local level and give you guys updates this way. If not, I'll go back to the regular format, whatever you guys prefer. And again, I really appreciate you spending some time with me today. I'll see you again. We're here every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, live at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. I hope you have a great day.